So I have what I like to call a special ability, and I'm putting a real emphasis on the word special here. I can say something on this channel, and no matter how sane it may seem at the time, it will find a way to age worse than the bottles labelled milk in P. Diddy's bedroom. That is exactly what happened with Franco Colapinto. Firstly, my video on Sargent's inevitable demise saw me put Liam Lawson and Mick Schumacher in the frame as the Americans' replacement for the second half of 2024. That video was meant to go live at 5 PM on the 27th of August, only I brought it forward by a few hours as, well, you can work it out. Then, at 5 PM, Williams announced that neither of my picks would get the drive, and they'd gone with Argentine Franco Colapinto, a choice so out of left field he was practically in a different crop rotation. Off I went then to make a short follow-up video outlining just how this was an asinine decision that wouldn't solve any of Williams' problems, only for Franco to tear my argument a new one as he came out of the blocks flying, scoring points finishes in both Azerbaijan and Austin, while turning the lovable Alexander Albon into public enemy number one. That then led to this grovelling apology a few weeks later, where I now explained how wrong I was about Colapinto and how he now looked to be the next Ayrton Senna, only he dated women 10 years older than him as opposed to 10 years younger. So what does Colapinto do then? Well, he decides he's going to be shit now. So thanks, Franco. Thank you very much for making me look like I'm competing for world's biggest tit. Even when I made that last video on Colapinto, the warning signs were there that his season was about to turn ugly. A 12th place finish at the Mexican Grand Prix doesn't look too bad on paper, but the stark reality is Franco was consistently beaten by his teammate over the majority of the weekend, and that's despite the phantom fraud bond drone-striking Behrman in FP1, then spending the rest of Friday picking up the remaining pieces of his reputation. Albon somewhat redeemed himself by having a much better Saturday and getting all the way into Q3. His teammate, meanwhile, was 4 tenths back in Q1, seeing him fail to make the cut and start Sunday's Grand Prix from 16th. That gave him a scenic view of Fraud Bond 2, Attack of the Fraud Bond, Yuki Tsunoda the unfortunate victim of the Williams driver heading into Turn 1. And despite that, Colapinto was unable to show anything special for the remainder of the Grand Prix, topping it off with a rather clumsy collision with Lawson in the closing stages, which earned the Argentine an extra 10 seconds to his race time, on a day where the stewards had a penalty fetish. We all let that slide though. It was only his 5th Grand Prix, he'd shown stellar performances in the first 4, and 99% of social media wanted to strap him onto a bed and f*** the ever-living shit out of him. See, Nikita, if you were just attractive, they might let you off for this. A bump in the road then, except that bump was a warning, and the road was about to lead Colapinto's career off of a f***ing cliff. The Sao Paulo Grand Prix represented something more like Kerry Katona's downstairs garden as opposed to a racetrack, and several big names bit the dust early during qualifying. Leading that pack was Franco Colapinto, who picked this moment to investigate the aerodynamics of his Williams when pointed the wrong way. This wasn't the first time Franco had thrown his FW46 into the barriers, but at least in Baku, the team had time to fix it. Here, Katona delays had pushed the Grand Prix qualifying back to Sunday morning, and with the team lacking both time and spare parts, it was over to Fraud Bond 3, revenge of the Fraud Bond to bin it in even worse fashion during Q3. With the team in crisis, the decision was made to cancel Fraud Bond 4, renew Fraud Bond, and shift all efforts into getting Franco ready in time for the Grand Prix. And despite all the odds, somehow, they made it. Oh, never mind, he's in the wall again. This crash was bad. Really bad. Not only were several Williams mechanics now found hanging from the team's pit stands, this had all happened under the safety car of all things. Now, I don't want to talk down the Challenger that afternoon, but all this incident did was highlight the risks posed by signing Franco up in the first place. You're throwing a guy who hasn't even completed a full season of Formula 2 straight into the big leagues, and then bigging him up like he's the next coming of Senna, or while he's just 21 years of age. Despite this, Colapinto was still on the radar for other teams, even some that had supposedly confirmed their driver lineups for 2025. He may have bankrupted his current employers, but there was still a shot for this kid. And then Vegas happened. Another weekend, and another big incident, one that felt even more painful after the team put a video diary together outlining all the hard work that had gone into unf***ing their situation from Brazil. There was now a pattern forming, clear by the countless memes of Williams' Lego sets coming pre-assembled over social media, and the rest of the paddock were taking notice too. The hot topic that was Franco Colapinto had just started to cool, and what once looked like a guaranteed seat for 2025 was fading away fast. Franco still had 2 races to redeem himself, but in Qatar he was well off the pace of Albon, then got Ocons down into Turn 1, before a fisting from Piastri at the season finale in Abu Dhabi ended any hope of a performance there as well. It was a bitter end to what started as a really strong run of races, but the question is, did the overall gamble on Colapinto fail? Well, you've already read the title, so yes. Yes, it did. Let's just go back and remember why Franco was brought in the first place. Logan Sargent couldn't bring in consistent results and was developing an unhealthy obsession with tyre barriers. The American was essentially burning the stick at both ends. His race finishes weren't bringing in any cash, and he was spending a fair bit of it through his adventures into the wall. When we take a look at Franco's overall stint in Formula 1, did he really improve on the team's fortunes that much? Well, credit where credit's due, and by his second Grand Prix, Franco had more points than Sargent had amassed in 18 months. That initial strong showing was enough to inspire practically an entire continent, which in turn led to a huge boost in sponsorship money for both the team and Formula 1 as a whole. But then there were the incidents. Colapinto found himself in 6 high-profile crashes throughout his 9-race stint, 2 more than Sargent had managed over the initial 15. I'm not saying Fraud Bomb was much better, in fact he was worse, but he at least had the whole season to amass all those. This is also the bit where I was going to bring up crash damage and cost statistics, though every website I came across seemed to say something different, almost as if these clickbait articles had picked their numbers out of a fucking bingo machine and have no idea what they're actually talking about. Like according to this one, Red Bull front wings are made out of platinum or something. If the main reason Sargent was dropped came down to his little whoopsie in Zandvoort, then plain and simple, the Franco Colapinto experiment failed. But is it really that simple? Well, since we've not crossed over that golden 8-minute mark yet, let's talk over why things went so wrong. The first reason, of course, being I decided to open my mouth about this all these months ago. But on a serious note, Franco's sudden downturn requires some closer inspection, because someone doesn't just lose talent unless you're Lance Stroll and have 0 to begin with. When Franco initially signed up for the second half of the season, he knew his Formula 1 career was limited to the end of 2024. Williams had their lineup confirmed for next season already, and it's not like Franco was on anyone else's radar at the time, with everyone far more interested in the Kimi Antonellis and Gabriel Bortolettos of the world. Essentially, this was James Vowles saying, our current guy is driving like an arthritic T-Rex playing pool, come and have some fun for the last 9 races of the season. Okay, granted, it was a little bit more serious than that, but here's what that analogy looks like for anyone interested. No one had any expectations, as Colapinto had flown so low under the radar, so when he did begin to perform out of nowhere, all of a sudden there was a media frenzy. And this is what killed the second half of his season. What was initially a relatively low-pressure environment had suddenly transformed into the complete opposite. Franco was talking to anybody and everybody. Alpine were looking at how they could throw Doohan overboard at the earliest convenience in 2025, while Helmut Marko got into advanced talks for Franco to drive for RB, or maybe even the full work squad, as senile of an idea as that is. This wasn't fun and games anymore, and at Brazil, Colapinto finally cracked. The conditions that day were enough to catch even the best out, but once in that rut, Franco just didn't have the experience and struggled to get out of it. That prior confidence he appeared to have in the car was gone, and by the end of the season, so were his chances of remaining on the grid. Does that mean he's not deserving of a seat in Formula 1? Well, of course not. He's better than several of the drivers in 2025. Stroll, obviously. Doohan, though granted we've not seen enough of him yet to be sure. And let's throw #blessed in there for no other reason than to increase this video's engagement. Essentially, this isn't the end of Franco in Formula 1. Talent aside, he's shown just how much of a money-making tool he can be with the South American audience, and when you do take his talent into account, he essentially acts as the Liam Lawson of 2025. As soon as someone under pressure bins it, you can put your money on who F1's cameras are panning to. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'm just going to pat myself on the back here for not making a single Falklands joke in this entire video. I think that's the first time I've done that, so if you're also proud of me, I'd appreciate you leaving a like and getting subscribed, and let me know in the comments where and when you expect to see Franco back in an F1 car on race day. A huge thank you to the members and patrons who got early access to this one, and if you want to get involved in that, then you can head down to the links in the description below. I'll be back very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.